What is up, my dashing dudes and darling dames? I am the Hans TV, and welcome back to the only subreddit that talks about the inane idiocy of humanity. It's r/StoriesAboutKevin. Our first post for today comes from Builder397, my roommate Kevin. I live with 3 roommates at the moment from all parts of the world. I am also German and live in Germany. One of these roommates is kind of a Kevin. Not the worst kind of Kevin, but to quote a German saying, where other people have a brain, he has a water pedal. This Kevin is from Africa. I won't go into the country, and he barely speaks German, and seems to make absolutely no effort in improving that. That's the biggest reason why I rarely interact with him, as trying to communicate with him is just frustrating, having to constantly repeat the same simple things 3 times in various simplified variations. The first time I seriously interacted with him, he wanted help with his laptop, and as the resident tech expert, I agreed and we went to his room. Apparently, he wanted to get a certain game to run that he had heard about. The machine was running XP, so I dug around the system properties to find out that the CPU was an Intel Pentium M. These things came out in 2003 and were phased out by 2008, and were basically Pentium 3s with power saving features for laptops, because Pentium 4s were too power hungry. I then checked for the GPU and found that it had no drivers at all, so I spent another 15 minutes on that. Then I asked him to show me the game and the system requirements. It started with i3. I just plain told him, no. Are you sure? Yes. This game will not run on that machine no matter what. He paid 60 euros for the thing. What a ripoff. The second Kevin moment he had regarded cleaning weeks. He was informed of these prior to moving in, but the basic concept is that we each have a cleaning week one after another where we generally clean the house. Not necessarily polishing everything, but just wiping the floor and sinks and stuff like that. It didn't even contain the dishes, as we each did our own dishes. It didn't take long to figure out that any and all food stains on the kitchen floor mysteriously remained during Kevin's week. Trash wasn't taken out, the trash cans weren't put outside to be emptied, etc. So my other roommate had a word with him about it. He proceeded to laugh at her and explained his brilliant reasoning that he was, in fact, not a woman. In short, he didn't do squat, and no one could convince him otherwise. Well, blatant sexism aside, Jesus. The landlord knows about the situation, and apparently also had further gripes with him. I don't know the details apart from him wanting to keep the deposit or part of it, but it came down the grapevine that he is not fond of him either, and might push him to move out at some point as well, and take any costs coming from him not cleaning out of the deposit as well. Apparently, this also hasn't motivated him to do any cleaning. Other brilliant things he does. During every phase of this pandemic, he moved in right before it started, he has made less than 0 efforts to social distance, frequently visiting another house with about 10 people there, who probably have the same mentality. Even when visiting people was forbidden except for important reasons. He also had people invited over to us. I'm almost surprised he didn't drag in the big bag Corona yet. One of the friends he brought over was the complete Kevin as well, and that, at least as far as evidence allowed us to deduce, went on the normal toilet, left the seat down, then peed into it from a standing position, managed to pee all the way over the seat, and then had no ambition to clean it up and just left it as it is. We later confronted them both about it, and they just had this weird Kevin laugh, where they know they messed up but think no one can touch them so they don't care, and refuse to clean it. Charming. So not only is this Kevin an idiot, he's a sexist. And if I were you, I'd just be like, look, I'm not a woman either, and it's not women's job to clean, but I'm cleaning too. So there you go. This next post is a 2-parter that comes from Leo DGTV. Kevin is the worst roommate ever. So, a bit of backstory, I'm an RA. For those of you who don't know, that means I live in a dorm at my university, and I'm in charge of an entire floor of college students, mostly freshmen. I run events, decorate the floor with bulletin boards and door decorations, handle roommate conflicts, etc. Well, this year was probably the most interesting roommate conflict I've had to handle. So, around week 5 of the semester, I got a message on Discord from one of my residents. Let's call him Andy. Andy asks me if we can talk, and that it's kind of personal, so he'd rather talk in person. I'm not overly excited about having my kids be in my room/personal space, less so because of COVID, but I thought, what the hell? It's probably important. So Andy comes to my room the next day to talk, and he explains that he's been having issues with his roommate Kevin. The way Andy is describing, it sounds like typical stuff. You know, playing music too loud, playing video games and yelling real loud at all hours of the night, talking in the middle of Andy's classes, etc. Normally, this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but since classes are all online this semester, it's really hard to be able to focus in the middle of class or a test when your roommate can't take a hint when you're ignoring his attempts to talk to you. After talking with him some more, I could tell he was so stressed about this. I could literally feel the catharsis of him venting. Apparently, this had been happening for the entire 5 weeks school had been in session, and Andy had tried every possible thing he could to make things work with Kevin and to settle the conflict without my help. As much as I appreciated the sentiment, helping with roommate conflicts is my job, and he should have come to me much sooner, and I made sure to tell him as much. I told him we should start with a roommate contract so that he and I could enforce some mutual guidelines the two of them put down. I sent him the PDF of the contract, and within hours he had sent a filled out copy to me and informed me that Kevin had agreed to sign it. I got curious and decided to look over the roommate agreement to try and see what rules they put down. Most of them were normal. Lights out at midnight, don't leave food out, take the trash out when it's full, wear headphones when playing music or video games, etc. But at the bottom of the page, in the other section of the agreement, there were some interesting additions. For example, don't turn off the other roommate's fan at night, or don't talk to the other roommate during a quiz or exam. And then I get hit with a couple of doozies, like don't lock the door if the other is going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and don't show your roommate an open wound. It was at that moment I realized we were dealing with a Kevin. A couple of days later, Andy asked to speak with me again, and it was here that he explained that all of the weirdly specific rules were directed specifically at Kevin. Andy had woken up at 2 a.m. one night and went to the bathroom, and when he returned, the door had been locked. Kevin woke up, realized Andy was gone, and thought it would be a good idea to lock the door and then go back to sleep. And Kevin is a heavy sleeper. So Andy had to knock at the door for far too long before Kevin woke up and let him back in, and then was annoyed at Andy for disturbing his sleep. After hearing this story, I decided to ask about the open wound rule, and I honestly wish I hadn't. One weekend, Andy had gone home for the weekend, which is in a city a few hours away from my university. While he was away, Andy received a text from Kevin, asking if he could borrow Andy's duct tape. Andy agreed and heard nothing from Kevin until he came back. Upon returning to his dorm room, Andy walked in on Kevin standing over the trash can with his back to the door, and wincing/moaning in pain. When Andy looked, Kevin was peeling a layer of duct tape off of his finger. From what I understand, Kevin had a wart on his finger and tried to use a classic home remedy of using duct tape to cover the wart. But Kevin wrapped the duct tape around his finger and, I guess, somehow managed to mess it up, because when he tried to remove the duct tape, it certainly took the wart off. But it also took off a decent chunk of skin around the entire circumference of his finger where the duct tape was. Kevin then proceeded to try and wave his bleeding raw finger in Andy's face, to which Andy threatened to vomit on him if he didn't stop. Over the next few days, Kevin kept trying to show Andy how his wound was healing, despite Andy's constant protests. As soon as I picked my jaw up off the floor after hearing that story, Andy told me the reason he wanted to meet with me again was because, surprisingly, Kevin was still at it, and nothing had changed. In fact, Andy had received a warning from his professor because Kevin tried to talk to Andy in the middle of a quiz. The professor told him that if it happened again, he would fail. Kind of a dick move for the professor, but whatever. Andy wanted a room change, and as much as I would have loved to give him one, our normal room change process is closed due to COVID. However, I talked to my boss and he told me to at the very least attempt to mediate a conversation between the two of them, and if all else fails, we could initiate an emergency room change. So I asked him to meet me in my room that weekend at a specific time. I get a knock on my door 5 minutes early, and I check my peephole to see none other than Kevin standing outside my door, alone. So I reluctantly open the door and let him in. I begin by asking him how things have been in the room, not wanting to take sides too early. Kevin proceeds to tell me that things are great, and he's having no issues. So I point out that it seems like his roommates has been having some issues, and he just says, "Yeah, well, none of them are really that big of a deal." Right away, I'm blown away by the audacity, but I try to press a little further, reminding him that he has to share the room and that Andy is clearly uncomfortable. He then proceeds to tell me, "Well, I think Andy's just making stuff up and exaggerating to get his own room." Before I have a chance to respond, Andy knocks on my door and I call him in to join us. It's here that I learn that Andy is a freshman, as I expected, but Kevin is a junior. So I guess maybe the people in housing are Kevin's too for putting these two in the same room together. Not only that, but Kevin has had his last two mates from the last 2 years of college move out in the middle of the semester. He claims they were both for unrelated reasons, but the best part about the old room change process is that the RA didn't have to be involved at all. If you were having roommate issues and your roommate was just so bad that you didn't want to deal with your RA trying to convince you to work it out, you could just come up with another excuse to leave the room. Worked almost every time. Andy proceeds to try and voice his concerns to Kevin about issues in the room, and then brings up the fact that his professor gave him a warning because of the aforementioned quiz kerfuffle. Kevin then looks Andy dead in the eyes and says, "I think you're lying. I don't think that really happened. You're just making that up to get your own room." We were speechless, and then finally, I told Kevin off for being such a dick. I had tried to be patient up until that point, but I'd had enough. I basically told Andy I would be in contact with him about getting that room changed and sent them both on their way. We did. By the way, managed to get Andy into his own room, and because of COVID, he was able to move into one of the rooms that just happened to have been left empty on the floor, so he's still my resident. Thankfully, in a few days it took Andy to get out, nothing happened. But that was mostly because they were too annoyed with each other to say anything to one another. So that's it. Sorry this was so long and that it doesn't have a more satisfying ending. Unfortunately, showing an open bleeding wound to your roommate isn't quite as punishable as underage drinking or smoking marijuana in the building. This was already really long, so I won't add any more to it. But let me know if you guys enjoyed this, and maybe I'll tell you about the Flyer Fiasco that's still happening with Kevin as we speak. And speaking of the Flyer Fiasco, continuing my story about bad roommate Kevin. Due to popular demand, because y'all seem to really be interested in this flyer nonsense that Kevin pulled. This story is much shorter, but really made me question whether or not Kevin was doing things maliciously, or if he was really just that socially inept. So, after Kevin's roommate Andy moved out, things were quiet for about a week. But that week didn't last very long. One day I left my room to go to the bathroom, and on my bulletin board was a flyer. For those of you who didn't read the last story, I'm an RA, so putting up bulletin boards is part of my job. Now keep in mind, I have 2 bulletin boards. Or more accurately, I have one bulletin board that was so massive I divided it up into 2 sides. The left side is my actual bulletin board that I have to put up for my job. And it talks about the typical BS, SMART goals and the dimensions of wellness, whatever. Important info for the residents, and to make it easier for me to put up and take down, I stuck all the little info bubbles in with push pins. Immediately to the right of this bulletin board, I have another one that's specifically for posting flyers for events, clubs, etc., also with push pins stuck in it so people can hang things up with ease and not have to use tape. The flyer that I saw was not stuck to the bulletin board specifically for flyers. No, that would be ridiculous, right? No. Instead, this flyer was stuck to my informational bulletin board. Someone had literally taken one of the push pins out of one of the pieces of paper on my bulletin board, put their flyer over it, and stuck the push pin back through both of them. And by someone, of course I mean Kevin. Kevin hung his flyer specifically so it blocked like half of the information for that section of the bulletin board. If that wasn't egregious enough, the contents of the flyer were what confused me further. You see, I knew it was Kevin who posted the flyer because the flyer was advertising his YouTube channel. Now, I can't show the flyer because of privacy reasons. The dude literally named his channel Kevin Malone Cycling. Name changed for obvious reasons. Now, I know what y'all are probably thinking. It's probably a really nice looking flyer. QR code leading to his channel, some info about it, maybe some screenshots. You would be wrong. Very wrong. The flyer consisted of a header, which was in 12-point Times New Roman font that said, "My YouTube channel." Under this, he posted a screenshot from his YouTube page. By which I mean he literally went to his YouTube channel home page, hit print screen, and then pasted it into the Word document. Underneath the picture was another line of text. A footer, if you will. This footer was also in Times New Roman 12-point font and simply said, "Come support a fellow member of your residence hall." I texted my RD, my boss, and told him about the situation and asked him what to do. and he just suggested that I email Kevin. The act wasn't quite blatantly antagonistic for me to be able to claim it was intentionally rude, but it was pretty damn close. So I sent an email that read a little something like this. Hey Kevin, I saw the flyer for your YouTube channel that you had posted around the floor, including on my bulletin board. While I encourage you guys to post personal ads and promote your own activities, passions, and projects, we have an events bulletin board, the green one, that you could post it to with either the available push pins or the tape/staples. I would, however, rather you not post them on the bulletin boards in which I have information posted. And I certainly would rather you not post them in a way that obscures the information on the bulletin board. I took the liberty of removing the flyer you attached to my informational bulletin board and placing it on the events board where it's not obscuring any important information. In the process of posting it, I noticed some of your floor mates took a look at the one you had posted to your door as well as the one I had moved on the bulletin board. So hopefully they take an interest and subscribe. Good luck with your YouTube channel, I'll have to check it out sometime. I did, by the way, go check out his YouTube channel. It's kind of incredible. Keep in mind, I'm the kind of guy who loves watching The Room over 30 times per year. So when I say incredible, I mean it's reminiscent of Alan Tutorial, but in an unironic way if that makes any sense. All of the videos are recorded on a cell phone. The intro graphics look like they were made in MS Paint. He uses poorly balanced royalty-free music in the background. And when I say in the background, I mean it's so loud it sounds like it's a video for a royalty-free song. And his voice is just the preview sound that plays every few minutes to discourage people from using the music without playing. There's no fade on the music either. A couple of the videos have just music as the intro and then it just abruptly cuts. I don't want to keep ragging on him because honestly, my first attempts at making YouTube videos were equally cringy. And I can just tell by going through his timeline that he's getting better at editing as he goes. Maybe one day when I'm no longer his RA, I'll make a video about his channel. Because I currently have a YouTube channel that's solely based around that kind of so bad it's good kind of content. Shameless plug. So I send in the email and a few days later I get a literal one sentence email back saying thanks for the email and asking if he can post flyers in the bathroom. I decided not to respond right away because I just couldn't process it at that moment. That was clearly a mistake because within a day or two he posted more flyers around the floor, one of which he did in fact post on the events bulletin board. I had to look at it kind of closely though because it looked like he posted 2 flyers on top of each other. I thought that was a little odd of him, but he's done weirder things before. So I go to take the top flyer down and move it somewhere else. But when I pull the push pin out and take the flyer off, I see that he posted his YouTube flyer on top of a flyer for the Asian Cultural Club in my building. So immediately I threw his flyer away and went back to my email to yet again try and address the situation. Kevin, I'm okay with 1 or 2 flyers in the bathroom, as long as they aren't taking up the space where other flyers would hang, and as long as they're not placed over top of other flyers. The first one you put up obscured information on my bulletin board about wellness, and I just now had to take one down that you put over top the Asian Cultural Club flyer on the events bulletin board. This is starting to come off as disrespectful, and if it continues to be an issue, I'll have to ask you to take them all down. You have every right to put up flyers if you would like, but the flyers that are currently up have just as much right to be there, if not more, seeing how most of the other flyers were placed by our RAs and other student staff who are promoting groups and events in the building. I would appreciate it if you would stop using your flyers to cover up important documents and information around the floor, please. He emailed me back within a day or two, and all his email said was, "Okay, got it. Do you have tape for my flyers and headphones that I broke?" I'd had enough at that point, so I didn't respond. If he wanted to put flyers up, he could use his own tape. Within 2 more days, he had posted a flyer for his YouTube channel in every single stall in the bathroom, and several by the sinks. Again, I wish I had more of a resolution for this one, but I don't. Every once in a while, I'll find a poster in a new place, often in places they shouldn't be, like on other residents' doors. I'm honestly at a loss for words at this point, and he just continues to baffle me. You're not the only one who's baffled by this. Like, I don't go around advertising my YouTube channel to gain subs. I do that through the algorithm and let them come to me instead of saying, "Hey, subscribe." That's why I put it at the end of the video. But with that being said, that's going to do it for today's episode of r/StoriesAboutKevin. I hope you liked the stories, and if you did, I'm going to link them in the description as always. And if you liked the video, subscribe, share, drop a like, and a comment down below what you'd like to see me read next. A humongous thank you to everyone who has subscribed in the past few months. I cannot thank y'all for what y'all are doing for this channel. We just hit 500, which is a major milestone for me. We're halfway to 1,000. That's amazing, and I cannot thank y'all enough for doing that for me. But with that being said, I will see you in the next video.